for few of the Prophet's neighbors abstained from the maligning him. They even threw the entrails of a goat on his back while he was performing his prayers. He always used to complain about that unbecoming neighborliness, but to no avail, for they were deeply indulged in error. Al-Bukhari, on the authority of Ibn Masud, narrated that once when the Prophet was prostrating himself while praying in Al-Kaaba, Abu Jahl asked his companions to bring the dirty feet of a she-camel and place it on his back. Was the unfortunate man who hastened to do this ignoble act. A peal of laughter rose amongst the infidels. In the meanwhile, Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, happened to pass that way. She removed the filth from her father's back. The Prophet invoked the wrath of Allah upon them, especially upon Abu Jahl. It is recorded that all of them were killed in the Battle of Badr. Scandal, mongering and backbiting were also amongst the means of oppression that the chiefs of Mecca in general and Umayyah in particular resorted to in their overall process of evil doing. In this regard, Allah says, "Woe to every slanderer and backbiter who once attended an audience of the Prophet and listened to him preaching Islam. A close friend of his heard of this. He could not tolerate any act of this sort, so he reproached Uqba and ordered him to spit in the Prophet's holy face, and he shamelessly did it. Did not spare any thinkable way to malign the Prophet. He even ground old decomposed bones and blew the powder on him. Used to detract from the character of the Prophet. In season and out of season, the Noble Quran, in direct reference to this man's ignominious deeds, attached to him 9 abominable traits. And obey not every one who swears much and is considered worthless, a slanderer, going about with calumnies, hinderer of the good, transgressor, sinful, cruel. After all, that base born of illegitimate birth. Abu Jahl's arrogance and haughtiness blocked all avenues that could produce the least light of belief in his heart. So he, the disbeliever, neither believed in this Quran, in the message of Muhammad, nor prayed. He moreover wanted to debar the Prophet from the noble sanctuary. It happened once that the Prophet was praying within the precinct of the sacred house, when Abu Jahl proceeded threateningly and uttering abusive language. The Prophet chided him severely, to which Abu Jahl answered back defiantly, claiming that he was the mightiest in Mecca. Allah then revealed, "Then let him call upon his council of helpers." In another version of the same incident, the Prophet took Abu Jahl by his neck, rocked him severely, saying, "Woe to you, O man disbeliever!" And then again, "Woe to you, again, woe to you, O man disbeliever!" And then again, "Woe to you!" Notwithstanding this reproach, Abu Jahl would never wake up to himself, nor did he realize his foolish practices. On the contrary, he was determined to go to extremes, and swore that he would dust the messenger's face and tread on his neck. No sooner had he proceeded to fulfill his wicked intention than he was seen turning back, shielding himself with his hands, as if something horrible in his pursuit. His companions asked him what the matter was. He said, "I perceived a ditch of burning fire and some wings flying." Later on, the messenger commented, saying, "If he had proceeded further, the angels would have plucked off his limbs, one after another." Such was the disgraceful treatment meted out to the prophet. The great man, respected as he was by his compatriots, with an influential man, his uncle Abu Talib, at his back to support him. If the matter were so with the prophet, what about those people deemed weak with no clan to support them? Let us consider their situation in some detail. Whenever Abu Jahl heard of the conversion of a man of high birth with powerful friends, he would degrade his prudence and intellect, undermine his judgment, and threaten him with dire consequences. If he was a merchant, if the new convert was socially weak, he would beat him ruthlessly and put him to unspeakable tortures. The uncle of Uthman used to wrap Uthman in a mat of palm leaves and set fire under him. When heard of her son's conversion, she put him to starvation and then expelled him from her house. He used to enjoy full, luxurious, easy life, but in the aftermath of the torture, she sustained his skin got wizened, and he assumed a horrible physical appearance. Bilal, the slave of Umayyah bin Khalid, was severely beaten by his master when the latter came to know of his conversion to Islam. Sometimes a rope was put around his neck, and street boys were made to drag him through the streets and even across the hillocks of Mecca. At times he was subjected to prolonged deprivation of food and drink. At others he was bound up, made to lie down of the burning sand and under the crushing burden of heavy stones. Similar other measures were resorted to in order to force him to research. All this proved in vain. He persisted in his belief in the oneness of Allah. On one such occasion, Abu Bakr was passing by, moved by pity. He purchased and emancipated him from slavery. Another victim of the high-handedness of Quraysh was Ammar bin Yasir, a freed slave of Bani Makhzum. He, along with his mother and father, embraced Islam in its early phase. They were repeatedly made to die on the burning sand and were beaten severely. Ammar was at times tossed off on embers. The Prophet was greatly moved by the atrocities which were being perpetrated upon Omar and his family. He always comforted them and raised his hand in prayer and said, "Be patient, you will verily find your abode in the paradise." Yasir, the father, died because of repeated tortures. Sumaya, Amr's mother, was bayoneted to death by Abu Jahl himself, and thus merited the title of the first woman martyr in Islam. Ammar himself was subjected to various modes of torture, and was always threatened to sustain severe suffering unless he abused Muhammad and recanted to Allah and Uzza. In a weak moment he uttered a word construed as recantation, though his heart never wavered, and he came back once to the Prophet, who consoled him for his pain and confirmed his faith. Immediately afterwards the following verse was revealed: "Whoever disbelieved in Allah after his belief, except him who lost thereto and whose heart is at rest with faith. Abu Fakir Afla, a freed slave of Banu Adar, was the third of those helpless victims. The oppressors used to fasten his feet with a rope and drag him in the streets of Mecca. Was also an easy victim to similar outrages on every possible occasion. He experienced exemplary torture and maltreatment. The Meccan polytheists used to pull his hair and twist his neck, and made him lie on burning coil with a big rock on his chest to prevent him from escaping. Some Muslims of rank and position were wrapped in the raw skins of camels and thrown away, and others were put in armors and cast on burning sand. In the scorching sun of Arabia, even the women converts were not spared, and the list is too long to include all of them. Zanira and many others had their full share of persecution at the hand of the oppressors, included of course before his conversion to Islam. Abu Bakr, a wealthy believer, purchased and freed some of those she slaves, just as he did with regard to Bilal and Amir bin Fuhaira. The house of Al-Khan. In the light of these inhuman persecutions, the Prophet deemed it wise to advise his followers to conceal their conversion in both word and deed. He took the decision to meet them secretly, lest Quraysh should get to know of his designs, and so take measures that might foil his goals. He also had in mind to avoid any sort of open confrontation with the polytheists, because such a thing at this early stage would not be in the interest of the newly born corps, still vulnerable and not fully fledged. Once in the 4th year of prophethood, the Muslims were on their way to the hillocks of Mecca to hold a clandestine meeting with the Prophet, when a group of polytheists did observe their suspicious movement and began to abuse and fight them. Being a polytheist had shed his blood, and thus recorded the first instance of bloodshed in the history of Islam. The Prophet, on the other hand, used to proclaim the Islamic faith and preach it openly with deep devotion and studious pursuit, but for the general welfare of the new converts and in consideration of the strategic interests of Islam. He took Adar al-Arqam in As-Safa mountain in the 5th year of his mission as a temporary center of meet his followers secretly and instruct them in the Quran and in the Islamic wisdom.